Hello, digital educator, and welcome to this continued series for visible learning strategies for digital instruction. And in today's talk, we're going to be talking about something that's one of the most simple, easiest ways to augment engagement when it comes to online synchronous instruction. And so, this, if I can make my cursor down here, strategy is pre-planning embedded questions for engagement, which falls underneath Hattie's classification of concentration, persistence, engagement, which has an effect size of 0.56. Through the use of this strategy, it's not like you're going to double the number of passing students on the Regents exam, but it is something that is worthwhile and it's something that's very incredibly easy to do. And so it does not cause a whole lot of planning in order to go through it to do. So one of the points that I've talked about a lot when it comes to online instruction is that if you're doing this online synchronous instruction, you almost have to be like a YouTube personality, that you have to be this person that is like an entertainer, that is providing entertainment, that is causing interactions. A lot of times when you're watching a YouTube video, someone that knows really what they're doing about how to get YouTube, how to get more clicks, how to get more engagement, how to drive that algorithm so that more people are driven to the videos, you'll hear them talk about in the comment section below. You let me know what, or vote in the comment section below, say that. And this, what it does is it gets people feeling like they're part of a community because they go through and they read people's responses. It makes people feel like their voice matters and like they can get those things out there. And this is the same that goes for our kids inside of the school. So be a YouTube personality. We're going to talk about planning embedded questions for engagement. So to get students to perform at the highest level, we really have to get them engaged at 3 levels, which is the behavioral, the cognitive, and the emotional levels. And just like the same way you're in class, you'd pre-plan which questions you're going to ask, you should do the same thing when it comes to online instruction. This is best for synchronous instruction, that is online in synchronous instruction. And it is a good way to show the application and extension of knowledge. Before we go any further, we should talk about the types of engagement though. The 3 types like I talked about: behavioral, cognitive, and emotional. Behavioral is basically how long can you behave, how long before your executive functioning runs out. Cognitive, that means how can we get the kids to think, how learners think about and make connections with what they're learning. Emotional engagement means they're connected, they feel like they're part of a learning community. The questions that I boil this down to when we want to direct engagement in each of these 3: behavioral engagement. How do I refresh students' executive functioning? Because as we'll see here in the video from Chip Heath, it is very likely, it is very possible, and it's a very real thing that kids run out of executive functioning. It's an exhaustible resource. Cognitive engagement. How do we get kids to think about it? How do we make it so kids want to think about it? And it's inescapable for kids to think about the content and think deeply about the content. Emotional engagement. How do I get kids to feel like they care about people and that they are cared about, that they're part of something bigger than themselves? That's tough when we have kids that are at home. And loading the video here. Why change is so hard? Chip Heath from the book Switch.
You hear something a lot about change, and that is that people don't change because they're too lazy. Well, I want to go to bat for the lazy people for a second, because I think that what looks like laziness is often exhaustion. Let me tell you about a fascinating study in psychology. So picture the scene. Some students come into a lab, and it smells amazing. Somebody's just baked fresh chocolate chip cookies. And in front of them is a table, and on the table are 2 bowls. And one of the bowls has the fresh baked chocolate chip cookies. The other bowl has a bunch of radishes. Now, some of the students are asked to eat a couple of the cookies, but to leave the radishes alone. Another group of students is asked to eat several of the radishes, but to leave the cookies alone. Now, while these radish eaters are sitting there nibbling on this rabbit food, the researchers go out of the lab. They're trying to induce temptation. They're trying to see, will these radish eaters sneak a cookie? It's kind of sadistic when you think about it. But the radish eaters are strong. They resist the cookies. Not a single one of them sneaks one. And meanwhile, as you can imagine, the cookie eaters don't experience the same kind of temptation to binge on the radishes. So, study appears to be over. And then both groups are asked to go on to a second step that doesn't appear to be related. It looks like a kind of logic puzzle where they're asked to trace out a complicated geometric shape without raising their pencil above the paper. Unbeknownst to them, this task was designed to be impossible, can't be done. The researchers simply wanted to see how long they would persist in a difficult task. Well, so the cookie eaters, they try and they try and they try, and they go on for an average of 19 minutes trying to solve this impossible puzzle. The radish eaters, they last on average 8 minutes. Why this huge gap? Well, the answer may surprise you. The radish eaters ran out of self-control. After they were reining themselves in, resisting those cookies, they didn't have enough energy left to rein themselves in to keep doing a frustrating task. And this is something that psychologists have proven again and again. Self-control, in the broad sense of the term, meaning any time we're really monitoring our own behavior carefully, is exhaustible. That helps to explain some common things we all experience, like when we're at work and it's been a really hard day and we come home and we're more likely to snap at our partners or to eat more than we should. Now, here's why all of this matters for change situations. Because in almost every change situation, what we're doing is we're substituting new, unfamiliar behaviors for behaviors that are older and more comfortable. And that burns self-control. So think of your morning routine, for instance. You have a way, a system for showering and brushing your teeth, and you've been doing it for so long it's unconscious, it's effortless. What if you wanted to redesign the whole thing from top to bottom? You could do it, but it would take tremendous self-control. You would have to monitor yourself every second of the morning, and by the time you got to work, you'd be mentally exhausted. What looks like laziness is often exhaustion. Change simply wears people out. Even well-intentioned people will simply run out of self-control after a while.
Some of the research that goes along with what Chip Heath talked about here was the Stanford marshmallow experiment, in which they would take small children into a room and they would put a marshmallow in front of them and say, okay, I gotta step out of the room here, but if you leave that marshmallow sitting there, when I come back, if it's still there, then you get 2 marshmallows. And so they use that to measure whether or not kids could control themselves, and as a way of measuring how much executive function that kids had. So the big thing is that online synchronous instruction is not like watching television, because you could really care less when you're watching television if you learn something or not. It's about being entertained. The primary objective is not about learning, about assimilating new information. So we shouldn't treat online instruction like watching TV. And the flow of information that comes from watching television is unidirectional. It's coming from there to here the whole time. But what we need is it to come here and back the whole time. We need that transmission of information, because that helps to arrive at executive functioning, because we break up our instruction into smaller groups or smaller chunks. It builds that cognitive engagement, because kids have to think and they have to show representations of their thinking. It provides kids with this feeling of being a part of something other than themselves. So it's kind of surreal when you take an online class and there's other people that are there. If you don't have any interactions with them, it feels like it's not real. But as soon as you have these interactions with them, you feel like you're part of something more than yourself. And especially during times of the COVID pause or when we go remote, we have to feel like we're a part of something. We need to feel like we're emotionally engaged. And so that's what this chat is going to do. And another big concept that comes out of this is that all you have to do is plan some questions over the course of the whole instruction, just a few of them. Break it up, use something like the 10-2 rule, where 10 minutes instruction, 2 minutes of review, to allow them to recoup that executive functioning that Heath was talking about that gets exhausted, to be able to engage cognitively, to provide a sense of community, to have people going back and forth, and for that cognitive expression. All those things are really important. So build things in, like when you first come in, ask everyone, okay, in the chat, let me know, how are you feeling today? What's new? Ask questions like that. That's an easy one right off the bat. After 10 minutes, a really simple one is just to say, okay, I want you to summarize what I've said in the last 10 minutes or since the last time you typed in the chat. And then you can go through and you can monitor those. You can help to provide feedback about what is correct and what is incorrect about their conceptions of what is going on for the instruction. You can have students, whenever you give them a direction to go and do something, you always to check for understanding, to have them interact in the chat. Type in the chat a summary of what it is that you want, or that I want you to do when you're going off to individual groups. So that's 3 things right there. If you welcome them, if you have them stop and summarize periodically, if you have them restate what it is, that's 3 times, 3 questions that they have to type into the chat. And it keeps them engaged. And then finally, instead of just using other tools for your end of class checking, let's say we use it as our breakout room extension. We bring kids back together and say, okay, now that we've done our breakout rooms with interaction sequence, I want you to type in what your group said. Put those opportunities to type those into the chat. Now, they don't always have to be the content related either as well too. You could be talking about something and say, when it comes to this topic, I really dislike that. What do you think about this television show? And then people put it in there. It's a quick séjourne. It's a break from the content of what's going on. So take those opportunities to engage kids in concepts that are not just the cognitive engagement as well too. Take opportunities for the kids to talk about themselves, to build that community sense, to build that emotional engagement. But the big thing is, take opportunities and make them very intentional for kids to talk inside of the chat. This is a pretty easy one to go ahead with, like I said. Just have to be very intentional about it and plan it out beforehand. But if you need help with this, our model school staff is always here to help.